episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show with another really fascinating and exciting guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Christopher Cifelli, who is Vice President of Nutrition Research at the National Dairy Council, where he oversees the dairy and public health research platform there, ultimately with a goal to provide scientific evidence used to protect and promote dairy and public policy. And he's responsible for strategic planning, development, management of dairy-centric research on areas like chronic disease risk, childhood nutrition, the CDC's National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey related to research, as well as nutrition and sustainability. Dr. Cifelli obtained both his bachelor's degree and his PhD, his bachelor's in biology, PhD in nutritional science from Penn State University, where his graduate work focused on understanding vitamin A status and inflammation affect retinoic acid metabolism, including mathematical modeling, studying the effects of retinoic acid supplementation on whole body vitamin A kinetics. During his postdoc work at Penn State, he examined vitamin A kinetic storage and disposal rates in adults from different ethnic backgrounds. In his current role at the Dairy Research Institute, Dr. Cifelli is involved in development, design, initiation, management, and communication of various research projects on the health benefits associated with adequate dairy consumption, including studies examining effects of vitamins and minerals found in dairy on bone density, weight management, and metabolic health. Dr. Cifelli is also active in several professional organizations, currently serves as the chair of Science and Translation Committee for the International Scientific Association for Probiotics and Prebiotics. He's also on the board of directors for the Yogurt in Nutrition Initiative. In addition to all that, he's authored or co-authored dozens of peer-reviewed research manuscripts, reviews, and abstracts. A lot of really interesting topics we're going to get into today. Dr. Chris Cifelli, thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while.
Thanks, Ira. It's a pleasure to be here. And please call me Chris. I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I will do, Chris. And, typically on the show, I love to hand things over to our guest at the beginning, just to talk a little bit more about yourself. If you could, Chris, take us on a little bit of the prehistory to all this. If you could just tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you developed interest in science and biology, ultimately nutrition sciences. I think that'd be a great way to start off what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. I'm born and raised outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Grew up in a Penn State household, hence the 11 years I ended up spending there between undergrad and graduate school. Some of my fondest memories are going up with my family to visit and football games in the fall and stuff. In terms of professionally, I always liked science. I went into my undergrad thinking I was going to be a medical doctor, and I wanted to be a medical doctor. So I majored in biology and took all those classes. And about my junior year, had an opportunity to take some electives. And nutrition was a really good fit for two reasons. One, I was interested in it, in terms of better understanding how food and health, from that medicine perspective. And secondly, there was a lot of crossover, so I could get a minor in it pretty easily while still meeting my biology requirements. So, that's, I guess the start of my nutrition love affair. Those classes just really, just excited me. Here's the science nerd coming through. I was fascinated by how these nutrients, whether you're talking protein or fat or carbohydrates or your vitamins and minerals, like all the roles they play in the body, like your all the cofactors, for enzymes, you just think you eat food, it kind of goes in, you get some energy, you feel good, and you stave off some deficiencies, but they're so integral to all the physiological processes that go in the body. And so I loved it. I loved my classes. I loved Penn State, and one of the But one of the things I did wrong, and something I kind of try to tell people as I mentor them now, is I didn't do a very good job of getting to know my professors and building relationships. I think all of us understand the value of relationships. So, I had good grades and I did well on my exams to get into medical school, but I didn't separate myself through those letters of recommendation. So unfortunately, I didn't get in to medical school, and I was bummed, disappointed, obviously, as anybody would. But I was like, I'll get a minor, and I'll rectify that. I'll work on getting to know some people, building up my resume more and reapply. Biology, you couldn't get a master's. You had to go for a doctorate right away, but nutrition allowed you to. So that's how I kind of found my way into graduate school in nutrition. It was originally going to be the door to reapplying to medical school. I had a really great professor at the time, Dr. John Smith, and I asked him if I could work in his lab, if he had any openings, and his response was no. But he told me to email this professor, Dr. Catherine Ross, who I had never had a class with. I didn't know, but I did. As I emailed her and I met with her, and she was gracious enough to accept me into her lab. And little did I know she is a world-renowned vitamin A researcher, a National Academy of Science member, and just a tremendous scientist. And it changed my life. To be completely honest, working in her lab as a first-year master's student, you just know that this is what I'm supposed to do. So I quickly transitioned from a master's student to a doctoral student. Okay. I studied vitamin A metabolism and understood how things like getting sick and inflammation kind of impact the turnover of it, and how that could affect your immune cells and other processes. And it was a little bit of luck, but what ended up being for me, not getting into medical school ended up being one of the best things to happen to me, as it led me into a phenomenal lab, a great department, and to ultimately where I am now at National Dairy Council.
Outstanding. And continuing along that thought for a moment, Chris, before we get into a lot of your research, talk for a couple of minutes, just if you could introduce us to, I know there's the National Dairy Council, part of the American Dairy Association, and then there's Dairy Management Inc. Just talk about sort of the structure of all this, about sort of where you sit in this organization and what the organization represents, how many sort of dairy farmers we have in the U.S. nowadays. I'm not exactly sure of those numbers, but talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, Ira. It can be very confusing. So, National Dairy Council itself has been around since 1915, and it was established around that time when different farmers recognized the importance of milk nutritionally and wanted to help educate and promote its consumption. And about that time, you have professors like E.V. McCollum, who identified vitamin D, and he was up at Wisconsin, and he said, if we put vitamin D in milk, and fortify it with the calcium, it'll really help solve problems with rickets and stuff. So National Dairy Council itself, as an education organization, has been around for over 100 years, and they've their legacy is with childhood health, starting back with E.V. McCollum, and they're helping with rickets all the way through today, where we have programs like Fuel Up to Play 60, where we're helping to educate kids on the importance of eating healthy diets and exercising in the school setting. Now, in the early 80s, Congress enacted several checkoff organizations, dairy being one of them. You have checkoffs also for soy and pork and egg and beef, and I think there's even a Christmas tree checkoff, if I'm not mistaken. But so Dairy Management Incorporated is kind of the umbrella organization then that is encompassing the checkoff. So we at National Dairy Council is kind of like a business unit within the dairy management system, and we work for dairy farmers. They are our bosses. They are our North Star, and who we get up each day kind of thinking about and trying to figure out how we can help them by, educating on dairy and its health benefits. There's right now a little less than 40,000 dairy farm families in the U.S. And you have your range from, very small, dozens of cows to larger farms that are, thousands of cows that, all are unique, but all are producing milk that then gets, transformed sometimes into cheese and yogurt for us to consume. As a checkoff organization, we do have oversight by USDA, so we're not allowed to lobby. We can't, no lobbying, no influencing. Our role is strictly research, to better understand what happens when you eat milk, cheese, and yogurt, and education and talking to people about not just nutrition. We have a product research side that looks at the food science aspect of dairy. We have a sustainability team that is working to figure out how dairy farms can continue to reduce their environmental impact. So we are all about education and research. And
Got it.
I think also for people that don't know NDC, haven't worked with us, it's really important to know that the research we fund, everything good, bad, otherwise, we want published and presented because it's science at the end of the day, right? The only way science is advanced is for it to get out into the public and people to critique it and try to replicate it, try to build off of it. So, that's kind of our one of our guiding principles is to make sure that the work we fund, everything kind of gets out into the public domain.
Absolutely. Chris, before we get into some of the sort of the various health related research that you've done over the years, I just want to start sort of a kind of basic place because you've been mentioning things like vitamin A, vitamin D, and for about a decade, in sort of the middle of my career, I worked in the phytochemical business, and I developed this appreciation for plants that whether it was this tomato or a blueberry or whatever, once you got rid of the water and the sugar and so forth, you had this fascinating sort of combinatorial mixture of hundreds of phytochemicals in each of these plants that had sort of a wide range of activities. And it makes you think a lot about milk. Okay, you mentioned there's vitamins in there, there's water, there's the protein and so on. But I seem to remember a lot of research, and I think a lot of this used to come out of Japan and so forth, about sort of the peptides and all the other sort of biofactors. And milk is, again, one of these really unique combinations of stuff that we really have only delved into a bit. So I'm going to start with sort of the basic sort of question. You can go any way you want with this, but sort of in the laboratory, when you're like, what is milk? How do you look at milk in the lab? Like, are you really, what are you focused on nowadays? Is it mainly still the vitamins? Are you going deeper into sort of these unique peptides? What is milk to you as a dairy scientist?
That's a great question. I would say as a field in nutrition, when I probably got into this in the early days at NDC, we were very nutrient focused, in terms of understanding what calcium did and understanding what magnesium does. And, and that is important for sure. Milk, when you just talk about vitamins and minerals, is a good or excellent source of 13 vitamin and minerals. So it's got either 10 or 20% of your daily value. So it's a nutrient delivery vehicle, almost like a natural multivitamin kind of thing. But you're right. We've begun thinking about milk more as this matrix, right? It's not just a delivery vehicle for vitamins and minerals. It's got these whey and caseins that are, when they're digested in the gut, we know that these peptides are formed that may have blood pressure and lowering effect. We know that the fat in milk, if you drink whole milk, there's 400 different kinds of fatty acids in there, that are doing a whole load of stuff. So it's not just like saturated fat that, that we lump them together. And then that's not even counting all the other unique bioactives that we may not even have uncovered yet. So there is work being done, some funded by us, some funded by others, to better understand, some of these complex, unique bioactives that are in dairy products. But I think, blueberries, walnuts, milk, right? We know there's benefits from eating the whole food, as opposed to even eating the nutrient. I think a good example is like beta carotene, right? Like
Sure.
we know beta carotene is good. You seem to eat orange and bright colored fruits and vegetables, they lower your cancer risk. But when we tried to take beta carotene out and feed it to people, we saw, the opposite effect with lung cancer. It actually increased it. So there's both the bioactives, but then the unique delivery vehicles that they come in these whole foods that I think is really fascinating. And we don't know a whole lot about, these matrix effects because, it's not just, again, the nutrients, it's how they're packaged, the physical chemical properties of it all. So we're trying to understand that a little bit better. And, we have newer techniques now that we can really drill down and isolate different proteins or complex sugars like oligosaccharides or even things we didn't even know were in there before. So it is pretty cool. And that's with milk, that's even before you ferment it, right? If you talk about yogurt, you have a whole different ball game, right? You got the live bacteria then that have completely transformed the milk, and you have different bioactives. So it's pretty cool stuff. But I guess my take-home message for listeners is really, there's something about these whole foods that's so unique and hard to replicate. And we know the nutrients and we know the vitamins and minerals, but there's other benefits that we know kind of happen, but we don't know how it happens yet. And that's kind of, I think, where the field of nutrition and food science is heading.
Yeah, that's such an important point. You brought that up, and I remember that as well. Sort of pharmacokinetics when it comes to these mixtures. How you would have plant X from China that was a wonderful herbal remedy, but when you purified out that drug substance in the pharma company, wow, this is poisonous. And so these really interesting changes that occur or when you don't keep things whole. And I think it adds to the excitement of sort of, what's there, because we've only really, whether it's plants or whether it's milk, really only scratching the surface. With that, I'd love to sort of delve into some of the areas that you've been focusing on the last couple of years, and one that sort of the top of the list here has to do with inflammation, which is on all fronts is just reared its head as such an important biologic function in all sorts of diseases nowadays. You had this last year, June 2020, current developments in nutrition, effects of dairy product and dairy protein intake on inflammation, and you did this review of the literature. Finding sort of a wide range of very interesting effects, and in many cases reductions of biomarkers of inflammation. Once again, obviously we're just scratching the surface of whether these are peptides or other interesting fat, lipid moieties that are involved here. But what are some of the things that you're learning in general about inflammation and dairy, but also potentially some of the interesting mechanisms that may keep inflammation at bay?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ira. And, inflammation is just such a hot topic, right? Like you can go in any bookstore or on Amazon and Google like diets, and there'll be the anti-inflammatory diet, or cut out these foods, and you would think people are walking around like needing a fire extinguisher to kind of put out like the flames in their gut. The one thing when I talk about this, I always start with saying is, inflammation is normal. It's a good we've all fallen down and we've scraped our knees or cut our fingers, right? You want inflammation to happen. You want the redness and the swelling, because that's your body's like first, line of defense, right? It's trying to heal and clean and get the immune system ramped up. The inflammation that is, problematic is this chronic low-grade inflammation that we can't feel. And as you mentioned, we're seeing correlations between higher markers of this inflammation and cardiovascular disease risk or type 2 diabetes risk. And, to be frank, I don't think we really know which comes first. If you get some higher inflammation and that leads to your increased risk of disease, or vice versa, and probably it's cyclical, right? One is feeding into the other. But regardless, you don't want to have, you don't want your immune system just running on all the time, right? It's like any other thing. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. You don't want your refrigerator just running all the time, right? It's going to burn out, and and same with your immune system. You want it to kind of do its job and turn off. Unfortunately, I think for whatever reason, dairy has gotten in the spotlight with some other foods like tomatoes, of like, they're inflammatory. You got to cut them out of your diet. And, I think what we, and others have shown too, there's been 3 other systematic reviews have all shown the same thing. That, dairy foods, milk, cheese, and yogurt are not causing inflammation. And in fact, it seems like in certain circumstances, so if you are maybe obese or you do have some underlying health conditions, it actually lowers your inflammation. One of the studies that we funded, National Dairy Council funded at the University of Wisconsin under Dr. Brad Bowling, actually looked at feeding obese women, about a serving and a half of just regular yogurt, not Greek, nothing special, and showed that it helped lower inflammation. So again, is it the fermentation? Is it the bioactives? With yogurt, it may be a little easier to say maybe it's something in the gut, right? Because we know, or I know, I guess, the gut is actually one of the largest hosts of the immune system, which makes sense. You have so many foreign substances passing through us, and so maintaining that integrity of the gut to let just the nutrients in, but keep the bacteria out. And then those immune cells that are kind of monitoring everything, so with yogurt and the live cultures, it makes sense that maybe it's helping to kind of keep the peace in your gut a little bit better. For milk and cheese, it could be the nutrients that are helping with metabolic health. But either way, you can feel good about eating your yogurt as a snack or having some cheese or milk and cereal or whatever, however you like to get your dairy without it, increasing your inflammation. I will say it's really important. People are not eating enough fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and dairy. And because of that, we're seeing that most people aren't meeting their nutrient needs in general. And for most of us, that's not going to be you're not going to run around and have, pellagra or berry, but you may not be functioning as optimally. So, eating these foods, and dairy included, will help you overcome some of those shortfalls.
And, once again, talk about inflammation, we talk about the gut now, and that gets me now thinking about the microbiome, another very hot area the last couple of years, something that you've been involved in as well. Current Opinions Biotechnology, April 2017, Health Benefits of Fermented Foods, Microbiota, and Beyond. When once again, you talk about sort of the fermentation process. Obviously, when you're making yogurt and cheese and stuff, microbes involved, which we consume, but also, we got, this entire ecosystem inside us as well. So there's a lot of interesting interactions there. Talk a little bit about sort of the interesting areas to you, what you're looking at, whether it's digestive health or how our microbiota can, once again, as you were saying before, turn some of these peptides into other bioactive forms. What are you excited about with regard to the microbiome?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a complex but exciting area. It's your microbiome is almost like a city. Like you think about Chicago, where I live now, right? It's got its own neighborhoods. It's that have different residents, but they all kind of interact in one ecosystem. It's a fascinating thing. I think for me, we're starting to understand more that it's not about the numbers of the bacteria. It's about the functionality of them and making sure that you're maintaining like a diverse microbiota that has a lot of different functions. So it's not just the numbers of X bacteria versus the numbers of Y. It's what X and Y do, and what they do in relation is going to help decide whether you're kind of healthy or your gut's maybe in a little dysbiosis. I think as we think about like how nutrition can impact the microbiota, if we go beyond just the simple hey, eat a high fiber diet and variety, which we know is important. It's trying to better understand what makes a truly healthy microbiota. And we know that what's healthy for me, if I took my microbiome out and put it in you, Ira, and vice versa, we would both get sick. It doesn't. We know that there's a lot of variability, but we don't really understand enough to kind of be like, well, this is the general profile of a healthy microbiota. And it may not be perfect, but that would allow us to kind of then better maybe tailor diets or be a little more personalized in terms of what we tell people to eat or how to help their microbiome function optimally. So I think you're seeing a lot of work in that, trying to, whether it's through the metabolites the microbiota make, and or the niches and the numbers there, we're still trying to figure out that healthy microbiome microbiome and what it is and what it does. Because it's such a, when we studied it in grad school or as an undergrad, it was just a pass through, right? Here's your gut, and here's the enzymes that break down the food, and now we know they make their own vitamins. They are making short chain fatty acids. They are making peptides, and those are directly interacting with our epithelial cells there, in terms of communication, and it is truly fascinating. And then that's just one microbiota, right? We have a skin, vaginal, oral,
Sure.
so there, and nutrition impacts all of them.
Yeah.
And you asked me what I'm excited about. I would say too, I think we're beginning to better understand, that we always used to say you have a gut feeling about something. Well, we know now the microbiota through the gut-brain axis is communicating with your brain somehow and communicating and feeding information. And to me, that's super exciting, right? Because that's now a direct, even more direct link between what you eat, how the microbiota are processing it, and what it's sending signals to your brain. And I think as we unravel that, it's going to really change maybe how nutrition impacts, say, things like mood or stress, satiety. I think the next 15, 20 years, I know that saying that sounds like a long time, but I think we're really going to really unravel more of these mechanisms that will help us or help people eat healthier and actually use it to kind of help them improve not only their nutrition and health, but like maybe their overall well-being, because we'll better understand maybe like this gut-brain axis better too.
Because the and in a sort of disclosure here, I was a kid raised old school, lots of milk, lots of dairy. I have no problem with it at all. I love my dairy products. That being said, I have other members of my family that dairy doesn't work well with them, but and they bring home all sorts of weird stuff, things in the milk cabinet that don't look like milk. And I know you've studied a lot of, so you've done a lot of work in the comparison of dairy versus some of this oat, soy, almond, whatever is coming in the house. Talk for a little bit. Obviously, when you look at the labels on these boxes, I as a background in the pharmacology space, I can identify some of it, most of it. But at the end of the day, these are not dairy products. Talk a little bit about what you're learning there and some of the sort of dairy versus these non-dairy foods. And then at the same time, actually, I'll let you take that one. And then there's one other one I'll give you after that one.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's I will say, I guess I'll start by saying, consumer choice is important. We're not here to be the police on what people should or shouldn't eat. I've gotten this question from my mom or friends, about, maybe they're lactose intolerant, so they move to an alternative beverage. I guess there's two important things to consider. One, according to the dietary guidelines for Americans, every 5 years they go through the science and they make their dietary recommendations. And the last cycle just ended. And in their recommendations, the only alternative beverage included in the dairy group is soy, because soy beverage at least has the protein, the calcium, the vitamin D. It's got the closest nutrient profile to milk. The others, oat, almond, rice, whatever, they're not included. And actually, there was recent guidance for kids from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, among others, that cautioned parents about thinking that these alternative milks were as healthy or had the same nutrient profile. And that's really the recommendation I give. If you're drinking these beverages because you think they are as healthy or provide the same essential nutrients as milk, that you're misguided. And that's okay. You can still, if you like an oat milk latte, I'm not here to tell you not to drink it, but if you're thinking that the oat milk latte gives you the same 13 nutrients, that's where then as a nutritionist, I have to say, hold on, you got to look at the label and understand that you're not getting the same nutritional bang for your buck as you will with milk. Secondly, I don't know if people fully appreciate all the varieties of milk that are out there. You have several now lactose-free varieties. I know my mom and dad drink Fairlife. That's the brand that they enjoy because it's filtered, and so it's a little higher protein, and it's got really nice mouthfeel. It's not as sweet as some of the other where they've cleaved the lactose, but I know other people who enjoy, like a lactate as well. Most lactose intolerant people can still eat your hard cheeses, so like cheddars and stuff, and yogurt is also should be easily digestible if you're lactose intolerant. So there's options out there if you want to stay in the dairy category, but for me, again, it's important when I talk about people is, if you're just doing this because you love the taste of it, hey, that's great. We all have things we like, and enjoy, but if you think it's as healthy, that's, just take a step back and, think about maybe there's a better option or for you for that,
Sure.
and making sure you get your nutrients.
It's funny talking about mouthfeel. A couple of years ago, I was in Saudi Arabia, and I happened to be in a food store, and there was camel's milk on the shelf, and I tried it. It was different, much fattier than cow's milk. But that being said, and obviously, the U.S. or dairy industry heavily based on cows. Do you spend any time sort of looking at other types of milk in your research? Because I know one of the things they were very hot on over there were these interesting antibodies that camels produced in their milk that had other benefits. That any interesting other sort of non-bovine research or interest, whether you're doing it or not, that you're excited about in terms of dairy role?
Yeah, I know it's done. We don't fund or do any, obviously, because we work for U.S.
Sure.
dairy cow farmers, right? Dairy farmers. But you will see, especially in the Middle East, you're right, a lot of research on camel's milk. You'll see some on goat milk as well.
Yeah.
I'm not as up on that literature to really kind of say, but you're right. There's differences in the proteins and the fat and the taste, and most of us have probably, or a lot of us probably have had at some point a goat milk cheese, right? We know
Sure.
it just, it tastes different, right?
Yeah.
So there is just a different profile to it. But I think those fields are probably a little bit behind where dairy milk is in terms of studying, but it is certainly an emerging area.
What for the younger audience, the folks that are just starting out, that are hot into STEM and some of these emerging areas, talk about sort of agriculture and horticulture and sort of because we obviously we hear so much about the IT and obviously space tourism now and this and that, but this agricultural space is hundreds of billions of dollars, a major part of our economy. Talk about some of the things that, if people are just starting out and, maybe looking at a career or starting out in biology, but moving into that area, some of the things that you might recommend to the younger audience, the next generation that's going to be coming along and making a go in this particular area.
Yeah, hindsight's always 2020. If I had known I was going to go into nutrition, I would have taken more agricultural classes. You can go all through your undergrad to be a dietitian and go to dietetic school, or then get your doctorate and never step foot on a farm. Because and as a grad student, we had a teacher who was in community nutrition. I remember having to get up one Saturday morning and really feeling miserable about having to get up on a Saturday morning to go to like a forum where farmers from Center County, Pennsylvania were talking. Right. And they were a mix of farmers, but it was we had to take notes and write a report. And I remember rolling my eyes and being like, yeah, it's farming, right? But now, having been on multiple dairy farms, and you appreciate just how technologically savvy they are, and how hard it is to farm, and what they do day in and day out. And this would be true of people who orange groves in Florida, your soy farmers, almond growers. I mean, right? They are working hard to deliver us nutritious food, and I think I know I did. You take that for granted because I just saw my grocery store full of food and never really thought too much about how it got there. Some of the things like on dairy farms, from a technology standpoint, is you're seeing like manure management is a big one right now. So anaerobic digesters, so taking the manure and putting it into this digester where the bacteria break it down and basically produce natural gases that are again trapped. And then that's the gas and the electricity that not only can run the farm, but also supply energy to the surrounding communities. So you're taking a waste product, right? That, and turning it into energy. You can also then extract all the nutrients, all the nitrogen and phosphorus that is coming from that, and that's your fertilizer for your feed. You're seeing automated milkers, which the cows love. They walk in and get milked when they're ready, and they sit there and they are able to kind of have a treat, and it's the machines kind of handle everything. It looks a little Star Trek-ish, but it's phenomenal because the cows just know, and when they're ready, they go in and they get milked, and they're happy and comfortable. You see improvements in feeding and the rations so that you can be more efficient, so that cows are healthier. They're not as sick as much. They're not, they are producing more milk because they're well fed and they're well cared for, they're well nourished. And these are just some of the simple things that are pretty cool when you think about it, though, because the farm is running so much more efficiently. And there's been some studies to try to capture that, and just in the 7-year or 10-year time frame from like 2007 to 2017, these type of technologies have allowed U.S. dairy farmers to lower their greenhouse gases, lower the amount of water they're using, lower the amount of land use, lower the amount of like feed input. And those are big things as we try to look out to say 2040, 2050, when we're all trying to be net zero, or we're trying to strive to be as environmentally neutral as possible. So it's these types of technologies that, no-till, I think it's no-till soil, right? Turning the soil over and being mindful of all that. So, I encourage anybody that can to, visit a dairy farm or visit a farm near you, and just, really, as silly as it is, talk to a farmer and just see what their day is like and what they're doing. Because if they are animal farmers, they care for their animals and love them. And if they're, if they're producing plants and produce, they care for the land, and that's their livelihood. And, there's a saying, I think, that's, they're just borrowing the land from their children, right? It's not like they own the land. They're really trying to be good stewards of the land.
I can remember the days I spent a lot in across the river here in southern New Jersey, and I was always amazed. I talk about sustainability and circular systems. I'm like, farmers have been doing that for decades now. This is it's like we have a lot to learn that we've forgotten that just exists in these little ecosystems. So really exciting. Chris, at the beginning when we started out, you had mentioned Professor Ross at Penn State, and a leader in vitamin A and retinoid metabolism, who you had the opportunity to work with. Sort of just giving you the floor back for a bit. Other important mentors, influencers over your career, folks you're working with now, you want to give a shout out to, take it away, and anything else you want to mention about the organization or other important people that have been instrumental in guiding you along this path.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of, acknowledge, right? I've been in my career now 13, 14 years, if I count grad school, 20 some years, and I still have mentors to this day, and people that are kind of helping me continue to grow as a scientist and as a person. And I will say, Dairy Management NDC has been super supportive of just being a scientist first, and being a nutrition scientist for dairy farmers on equal footing, right? And just valuing just being a good scientist. As you mentioned, Dr. Ross, just you can say I still struggle with the words. She was just a phenomenal mentor in terms of teaching me how to be a responsible scientist, the ins and outs of the silly things of keeping notes, of running a good experiment, of being inquisitive, asking the right question, really, stepping back and thinking about the big picture, and and how your results kind of fit into a better understanding of a person's health, or in grad school, vitamin A metabolism and what that would mean for the person. Dr. Mike Green at Penn State as well was my co-advisor and my postdoc mentor, and the smile he would get just kind of do these crazy math equations to kind of formulate the kinetic rates of stuff, kind of just got me thinking about, you said pharmacokinetics. You don't think about that with vitamins and minerals, but there are these pharmacokinetics. And Dr. Ross was more the biochemist and he was more the physiologist, and so those two disciplines have always stuck with me. Like, we think about dairy foods and health, and you have to think about the mechanism and all that stuff, but you have to step back and say, well, physiologically, what's it doing to the body? And what it's doing in one system is going to impact. At NDC, there too many to name. My current manager right now, Dr. Michelle Slimko, is a phenomenal person. She's got a doctorate in public health, so she just thinks about things differently than I do, and it's been wonderful kind of having these discussions as two different scientists who have two different views on things, but both trying to kind of figure out where we're going, and always just pushing me to try to challenge me to do different things and to think about things a little bit differently. And I do think as scientists, one of the things, right, you're trained to kind of work alone, be a little bit wolfish, a little lone wolf, right? You're gonna, most of us, or a lot of us, go into academics and run our own lab. And one of the things I think going to National Dairy Council was learning, and I now enjoy, like, this team aspect of working together and being it. So those are just a few people. I mean, I've been very blessed. Obviously, my wife is phenomenal too, to be a support through all this. Having to put up with me talking about science all the time. But I would say that those people really helped shape me as a nutrition scientist.
Excellent, yeah. We all of our spouses, they really major part of the picture. We cannot leave them out at all. Definitely. Really fascinating stuff, Chris. I listening to it, I really sort of enjoy this theme overall. Whether it's the nutrition, the sustainability theme, obviously, your focus on chronic disease risk and reduction there. A very impressive sort of portfolio of work, and I'm really wishing you the best with all of this moving forward in the organization. For everybody that's going to be watching this episode on the YouTube channel or listening on the podcast, you've been listening to Dr. Chris Cifelli, Vice President, Nutrition Research at the National Dairy Council. Chris, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while. Obviously, thank you for all the fascinating research you're doing there. And as we say on our show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow through all your work and generation of this new knowledge. Really impressive.
Thanks, Ira. It was a really pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.